Good evening, WTU. I think I'm just about on time. Like, I wish I had some beauty assistants to help with my mad hair. It's no wonder my daughter calls me a mad professor. Okay then, I suppose I'll just wait a few minutes for people to log in. I've got to start looking in the mirror before I turn on these cameras. My daughter isn't actually settled yet. She's waiting for me now to finish this, so I've just been writing up the notes. I've printed them off. There's quite a bit of discussion to be had, really. This might not be too short a feed. I wish I'd brought a drink with me. So, yeah, for those that may know what we're on about, We the Undersigned, we've got lots of new members, so for all the new members of the community, welcome to We the Undersigned Have a Human Sovereign Right to Cannabis. We are basically a grassroots movement of people like me, just everyday folks, that are affected by cannabis laws in one way, shape, form or another. WTU is not about this mythical medical cannabis, but about human rights, about the autonomy of health, freedom of consciousness, right to private beliefs and practices, freedom of association, the right to the expression of identity, without being persecuted by the state unjustly. And we've been campaigning for several years now, and the group has been growing and growing and growing in strength. We now have 6,000 members, so welcome to all the new members. We've really bumped up a few hundred members in the last few weeks. Now, I'll recap for those that don't know. We have been, when I say we, I mean we the Undersigned. We have been corresponding with the Home Office now since 2018, and we have been making our case against their political policy of cannabis prohibition. Now, they have been writing back with various responses to myself, to various members. We've had lots of letter writing campaign. I am recapping a lot here for our new members, by the way, so please be patient with me if you're one of our regular strong supporters. So we've had lots of correspondence over the last nearly 3 years now, actually 3 years in March, seeking freedom of information requests, all kinds of things with the Home Office, trying to get them to justify their policy of destroying people's lives with prosecution because they choose cannabis, whether for medical or non-medical purposes. They've often written back with a standard boilerplate letter that we soon all recognise that we're all getting the same letter with very little changes whatsoever. We have since also sent in the Seed Our Future paper, to which many MPs also haven't responded once again, which to me is a bit of misfeasance in public office, but that's a different conversation for a different day. So, it took over 12 months for me to find a solicitor willing to challenge the status quo of cannabis prohibition in the UK. Every firm said, too expensive, too political, too expensive and take too long. And they're right on all 3 points, actually. It's a very politicised issue. It's not cheap to go through a judicial review, between £50,000 and £150,000, and it'll take a long time, mainly because the government waffle and drag their feet and can stall it and things like that. So, which is why we've had a very slow journey. I eventually found a solicitor, Robert Jappy, and we began the first fundraising campaign on the April 420 in 2019. And we managed to get a barrister to kind of review our position in law as it currently stood back in 2018, before the medical cannabis law changes. Medical cannabis law. So we've got quite a lot of history going on, and then we've had the COVID situation, which has basically added an extra year to our campaign because of how much it slowed things down. But long story short, on the 22nd of December last year, we, the Undersigned, composed a letter to the Secretary of State inviting them to respond to our arguments and the facts that we have gathered. But this time it wasn't just ourselves writing to them. We were being represented by a solicitor, Robert Jappy, and he was working on behalf of INTS. Now, on the 22nd of April, we sent that letter, not April, December, and if you go into the Files tab, you'll find in the Files tab the SOS V5, I believe it's called, which is the Secretary of State letter V5. If you have a look at that, that's our letter to the Secretary of State that was sent by Robert Jappy. That's significant because it's our first legal step. I know it's been a long 3 years, believe me, I feel it, probably more than most. It's been an ordeal, and it was a pivotal moment because it was our first legal step. And we knew that the Home Office, well, we didn't expect them to write back and say, by Jove, we got it wrong. We expected them to come back and give us the usual copy and paste bunkum, to use a polite word for it. However, they have given us a slightly different version, and the reason we had to go through this was because we had to ascertain their current position before we could progress any further. In other words, our legal representatives had to write to the opposing party that we have a grievance with to ask them their position. We have that now. This is basically the foundation of our challenge. From this we will build our challenge. It has been in the group for about a week now. I think Sunday or Saturday maybe I put it up for an opportunity for you to read, analyse, give feedback. I've had some great feedback from a few members, thank you very much. I've also read it and analysed it myself and taken my thoughts and feelings, and then today Robert called, and for once I shut my face and opened my ears and just listened to what he thought. And I have to say I was really pleased that Robert had picked up on a few things. Now, he didn't go into quite the same depth in us in some ways, probably because coming from a different point of view. Robert picked up on 3 key things. You can see in the notes, by the way, I have written it up. Robert felt that the quote from Dame Carol Black can be turned to make a counter-argument, because it references heroin, cocaine and then cannabis as the drugs that lead to the main cause of people seeking treatment. But it doesn't specify specifically out of those 25,000 people how many of those were for cannabis, or indeed how many of those were synthetic cannabinoids, because it is from the period of time when we had a spice epidemic. So Robert found that to be a very feeble statement for their argument of justification, and he believes that we can turn that around. He'd be very interested to see like a list of the drugs and the ratios of treatments according to the different drugs. And I was very pleased that he didn't need me to point out to him that they'd completely failed to put alcohol in that list and tobacco. Now, if Professor Dame Carol Black was supposed to be doing an independent review of drugs, not one that's subjective enforced by the Home Office, but an independent review, then surely all drugs should have been covered in that. Alcohol shouldn't be left out. Where does alcohol fit into that list? Do people get treated for alcohol more than cannabis, for example? Now, given the fact that many of us, myself included, no longer use alcohol and choose cannabis instead for rest and recreational purposes, or rest and recuperation, we think that's a significant point to raise, because if cannabis is the less harmful of the 2 recreational substances, then surely, as independent autonomous human beings, we should have a consumer right to choose the less harmful of the 2 consumer products. So I was pleased that Robert picked up on that in the first one. The second thing that he was all over was the second quote, which, who did that come from actually? Dame Sally Davis this time. He felt it was a weak argument because it's based, and he really emphasised this, the key word is potentially dangerous. So we actually were prosecuting and destroying people's lives because of a potential danger. So Robert was really unhappy with that. Many things in life are dangerous yet freely available on the shelf, alcohol especially. So this protection from harm justification is very fragile, and he feels can be argued quite strongly. And then his third point was to do with the ACMD quote that they've used to justify their policy. About the potentially, there's that word again, potentially dangerous risk to patients. To quote Robert, it was absolute nonsense and bullshit. It's really good to hear him talk like that. Obviously I don't think he'll express that way in the courts when we get there, but it shows he's got his passion in the argument. These are again roughly the words of Robert. He said the reason people risk using unregulated cannabis is because the government have made it so that medical cannabis, inverted commas, is only available through expensive private clinics, so that only the wealthy or private fundraisers can actually access regulated cannabis without risking prosecution. And because they get it regulated, they have lower risks, whereas poor people can't access it, so they're put at risk. And he said the government are putting people at risk by leaving them with no other choice. That's what he believes. I thought it was all very positive feedback. A few things that weren't picked up on. One thing that will be emphasised is that we didn't write regarding the decriminalisation of cannabis. Cannabis cannot be criminalised. Indeed, cannabis is not languishing in prison. Cannabis is not having its home taken, its jobs taken, its children taken. Cannabis is not criminalised. We are. So clearly the government has got no grasp of law. Law does not control inert objects. Law only controls things that have agency, people. In other words, it controls our actions with cannabis. And we're actually seeking for them to decriminalise our actions with cannabis on the basis that our actions with cannabis are causing no harm to others. And until such time as our actions cause harm to others, the state's got no right at all to smash our doors down, smash our homes to pieces, steal our possessions and sully our names. So I think we're going to have to make a first point on that. Law does not control the plant. So we will make a beginning statement on that. Another aspect that we feel is very much missed, when I say we, I mean we the community, and also Robert. I was very pleased he was in agreement. They've completely ignored all reference to human rights. WTU case isn't about whether cannabis is harmful or not. That's not what we're on about. Yes, we are trying to emphasise that the government has built up an entire policy based on propaganda and misinformation, seemingly for conflicted interest and personal gains. That could be seeming the case, which comes under the misfeasance thing we mentioned earlier. So we're not talking about whether cannabis is harmful or safe. What we're talking about is until our actions harm the rights of another, the government's got no right to infringe on our life. And that's what our case is about. So the WTU's position is that we do not dispute the potential harms of unregulated cannabis from the unlicensed and uncontrolled cannabis market. We're not disputing those potential harms. In fact, we're asking for them to remove those potential harms. We're asserting that the regulated and licensed and accountable cannabis market for adult purposes would yield the following benefits. It would reduce harm because it's now going to become from an accountable source with quality control. It'll protect our vulnerable because we'll have age restrictions, similar to have age restrictions with alcohol. Yeah, we know kids still get it, but it makes it harder. Currently, all you need is a £10 note. In fact, there's more kid dealers than adults nowadays. So no, let's get it in the shops. So protect our vulnerable. And by doing so, they would respect human rights, our human rights as adults, as autonomous adults that should not have a government dictating things to us like this. In addition to that, it would raise vital revenues for the country. In fact, it could save us from the recession that we're about to go into. And it would also increase employment. So the legal regulation of the cannabis market for adult purposes has got phenomenal potential to save people, our environment and our economy. And we intend to make that argument. We've got all the evidence to prove it, or to make the argument. So we also, I've noticed I've numbered things 3 twice. We also intend to make it that the WTU case, again, it's under the caveats of UN, UK and EU human rights law, that we assert that until our actions cause harm to another, our rights should not be infringed by the government. More so, our lives should not be harmed by prosecution to protect us from the potential harms that they allege cannabis has. So that is mainly where we're going to have to make a big argument. We're asserting that the personal, private cannabis practices of WTU members, they're a health issue, not a criminal issue, and the very concrete harms of criminalisation ought to be balanced against the potential harms of unregulated cannabis. This is point 4, but it should be point 5 because I got my numbers wrong. I was rushing. So yeah, we emphasise and reiterate that our case is about the application of the Misuse of Drugs Act against people in possession of cannabis or cultivation of cannabis for their own use in private, when there's no evidence of risk or harm to the public health or rights to others. And it's contrary to human rights law if they infringe otherwise. So to translate that into other ways, let's equate it to alcohol in one way. You can't infringe the rights of others. You can't get high, get stoned, go driving and have a crash and expect to be blame free. You have a responsibility not to harm others. So the key responsibility as everyone is to not harm anybody else. And also, if my little home grow that I've got that keeps me out of pain, how's that a threat to public health? Prove to me that my home grow that I use to manage my conditions is a threat to public health. So that's what we need to assert. So the question is not whether cannabis is beneficial to the individual or not. That's not the issue. The issue is, until we're harming somebody else, they should not be getting to us. You see, I'm repeating that a bit. On number 5, the presumption made by Chief Medical Officer Dame Sally Davies, Professor Dame Sally, forgive me, she presumes that homegrown cannabis is potentially dangerous. Homemade semolina is potentially dangerous. Homemade scrambled eggs is potentially dangerous. It's another joke. But aside from that, we have to take it seriously. Now, we have many members in WTU, myself included, that use their homegrown cannabis and homemade oils to treat their own conditions, some treating cancer, more effectively than with their prescription drugs. We have this evidence. We have evidence that homegrown cannabis of high THC 1:1 ratio oils is highly effective. They haven't got evidence to the contrary. So we need to get that before a judge. So, also, the ACMD assert homegrown is potentially dangerous. Like I say, so scrambled eggs. And raw cannabis should not be given status of medication. Now, again, it's not relevant. The WTU isn't seeking to see that cannabis has the status of medication. We're not bothered about that. We want our rights respected. However, we would say that our homegrown cannabis, we use it for therapeutic purposes. It's a herbal therapeutic, like you have lavender oil, for example, and other herbal therapeutics. So we would argue that if they're that bothered, we use it as a herbal therapeutic, and we're well aware of their asserted potential risks, but we make the informed autonomous choice to utilise herbal cannabis, as humanity has done forever, regardless. Now, we further assert that whilst cannabis from the unlicensed and uncontrolled market may have impurities and adulteries, those who home grow, especially if they grow organically, they have full control over what products are going into their cannabis. So therefore, this argument for the personal private, we're not here about commercial growers, personal private growers, that's another erroneous point. Now, if we were a commercial cultivator providing products to other people, then yes, it's important not to have impurities and adulterants. We only have those. That is a product of prohibition. If these companies, when I call them companies, they're just unlicensed companies. There's one from Birmingham, I do believe, I've heard on one of the social media networks. I'm not going to mention a name, I'm not sure if I should, but they're a brand. They've got their own logo. They've got huge factories growing cannabis and selling it around the country to adults that choose it for whatever purpose. But they're an illegal brand because they haven't got a licence, because the Home Office won't give them a licence. It discriminates them against them. So we have a discriminatory licensing practice. So if we can remove that discriminatory licensing practice so that such companies, as the one that's from Birmingham, were able to get a licence, fair access, equitable access, and then quality controlled, we'd know there'd be no impurities nor adulterants. So really, that is a problem of prohibition, not cannabis. So we say that individuals providing for their own needs, providing their own cannabis for their own therapeutic needs, we do not need quality assured standards. Maybe some of us do, but they will have access to prescribed cannabis by the time we've finished. And such measures only apply to businesses marketing their cannabis-based products. So, Robert kind of left me with some work, tasks. So far, our steps forward, if you will, where are we going with all this? So far, we've got two most current documents. We've got the WTU invitation to respond. It's got our case and our outline documents. We didn't send them the case outline, by the way. They haven't seen that yet. Although it is on the website, so anyone can see it. But they haven't had it sent formally to them. So, Robert has asked me to... He agrees there's no point in engaging with the Home Office any further. Before we announce our declaration of incompatibility, we need to get a bit more advice from the barrister. So what Robert has asked me to do is to compile your thoughts and my thoughts and his thoughts into a concise and succinct argument of 10 to 15 points, very brief, just the bullet points of the arguments, and pass that back to Robert. He'll have a look, pass it back, community will approve it. We'll do the usual toing and froing until we get to a state that we all agree on, mostly at least anyway. And then we pass it back to the barrister to ask the barrister for their opinion on the best legal avenue, to get this case before a judge, for them to make a determination on the evidence. Our argument, if you will, is that their evidence is flawed. The lack of Schedule 1 status is a good point. We will be bringing CEDAR Future in at this point. And their evidence does not support their policy. And we assert that their policy infringes our human rights. So this needs to go before a judge to decide. Simple as that. The talk is judicial review. Robert is saying we'll be looking at issuing a declaration of incompatibility between the Misuse of Drugs Act and the Human Rights Act. And then we'll be seeking a judicial review of the Home Office decision to decline our invitation to amend the law to no longer infringe our rights. This would then have a judge looking at their evidence and looking at our evidence, and we would have to get the comparison, and then they would make a determination as to whether they agreed or disagreed that the government's policy was infringing our human rights. That's where money comes into it. As said from the very beginning, it was estimated between £50,000 and £150,000 to pay for a judicial review. Which is why I say at which point only WTU teamwork can make the dream work. Now we have 6,000 members, right? If is the biggest word in the English language, 2 letters that contain so much potential. 6,000 members in this group. If everyone put £1 in a month, that's £6,000 a month. Over 10 months, that'd be £60,000. That'd be enough to start a judicial review. I think it's 50 grand to get one going, I think. Robert has or will be asking the barrister for a quote for his fees. So we'll have an idea what we're looking for, and we will be getting ready to launch the Crowd Justice fundraiser again. It's fucking time for a bong, man. So at that point, we need to start fundraising. And with 6,000 members in the group, if we all put £5 in, now I know we're all in hardship, believe me, I live in hardship myself. If we all put a £5 in, that's 30 grand a month that this community could raise. Which means, in 5 months, that's £150,000. That is enough for this community to raise the money to take this government to court for our rights. Without it, we ain't got a fucking hope in hell, folks. Is the short and that's it. Without money, it's not happening. Barrister's not working pro bono, only Robert is. Judicial reviews aren't free. Justice is only available to the wealthy in this country, same as health and knowledge. And until we get some money, we won't be making a case. That's sad fact. Sad fact. I could have a bong. Hold on a minute, would you? That is fast, instant pain relief. Muscle spasms, abdominal spasms, boom, gone. So, back to it. Well, snuds are good. These hoodies are good. So, what I'm going to ask of you guys, apart from your £5 a month, or whatever you can spare, is that you get into the files document, have a look in the files tab at the letter that was sent to the Secretary of State. Have a look at the Secretary of State response. Get yourself onto the WTU website, have a look at the evidence bundle that's been put together. If you haven't submitted a testimonial, get on there and put your testimonial in. Because only together can we make this happen. One man can't do it alone. We have had some businesses, on a positive note, volunteer some products for raffles, which raises a tiny bit of money, but really we need to make a concerted effort. Once we have the declaration issued, we will be restarting the Crowd Justice fundraiser. It's not COVID, it's a cannabis cough. So at that point we'll know what we're working for, and we have the potential. I cannot stress it enough. We have the potential as a community, but it will only come together if we come together. And if we don't come together, I don't know what might happen.
I'm hoping that there's lots of businesses now, because of CBD legislation, that are now about to be equally hammered by the law as those that like to use THC, because it's about cannabinoids. So I'd like to hopefully beg some CBD companies, now's your chance, because before you were like, oh no, that's THC, we got our CBD, we can market it. Not for much longer. But if we smash down prohibition completely, you got a heck of a market out there, folks. So how's about you invest in freedom, invest in the future of freedom, and pledge some money to the WTU Crowd Justice fundraiser when it's up and running. And that's it, folks. I am going to put all these thoughts into a succinct and concise document, which isn't always easy for me because I have a lot to say. I would like to have your thoughts in it too. I already have thoughts from quite a few members sent to me privately and in the group. I'd ask you all, get in the files tab, read the documents, read the letters, and then give us your feedback. Hard work. I'm going to have a look at any comments or anything I need to answer. No. So it seems the barrister is right with us and on the ball, already picking holes in their so-called evidence. Nice work, Phil. Hopefully the day in court comes soon, so it can finally shown why they want it kept legal. Yeah, I've got to emphasise, actually, this isn't the barrister, this is Robert, the solicitor. So as yet, it's Robert, the solicitor, that is helping. I'm corresponding with frequently. He's the person working pro bono for free, representing WTU. The barrister, on the other hand, which I believe is, as I understand it, someone correct me if I misunderstand it and I'm wrong, but in the Supreme Court you can't represent yourself, you've got to have a barrister, which is why we have to have a barrister. If that's wrong, please correct me, someone. So we have to have this barrister to interact in the legal challenges, the way I understand it, and they aren't pro bono. It's Robert that was picking holes in their evidence today, helping us, supporting our case, because he sees it. We need to get the barrister to see it, because so far, well, they're sceptical. Well, they know what the British government's like, isn't it? So yeah, they are sceptical for our hopes of success. Won't lie to it. Never have lied. It's not impossible, though. That's the key thing. Not impossible, just difficult. And just because something's difficult doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. I think that's it for now, folks. I'm going to go and tuck my daughter in and say good night. Any thoughts or questions, put them beneath. If you're a business and you want to donate goods to the raffle to help raise money, please email me, philmonk@wtuhq.org, and we'll arrange something there. We've got a wonderful product at the moment in our raffle, and next month we've got some wonderful soap products from, I call him Dave the Soap Man. I can't remember his business, but these are like the business. So that's next month's raffle prizes. We basically need businesses to take on the posting for me, because that's where the raffle stopped. I couldn't maintain the posting of the goods, whereas if companies send me a photo, I can raffle the photo in essence, and then the company sends the goods direct to the winner. That's the way it started, and if it keeps that way, then we'll be able to maintain raffles, and if not, then I don't know what we'll do. I can't think of anything else. So lots of love, folks. Keep your spirits high, give us your feedback, read the documents, get your ideas in by the, what day is it? Wednesday. I'd like in this next week, so by next Wednesday, say, to kind of have this succinct argument finished and drafted and sent to Robert. That'll be for him to consider, and then for him to send back to us, and then it'll go off to the barrister. So hopefully by the end of this month, the barrister will be receiving the third document, our arguments to their position, and request for judicial review. So please bear with us. They said it wouldn't be quick, and they were right. It hasn't been quick. God give me strength. Love you, folks. Keep well.